So a couple of days ago, I just got done watching The Sound of Freedom. Yeah, fucked me up big time. And I definitely want to talk about it. And there are certain people, groups out there that don't fancy people talking about it, putting it out there, putting the word out there, getting more eyes on it. But I am purely reviewing this as a film and deconstructing it and critiquing it as a film, despite all the hoo-ha, all the conspiracy theorists that have come out of the woodwork and claiming that this movie is bad for people to see. And I say I finally got around to watching it because it took forever for this film to be released in cinemas in Australia. When I did, it was limited screenings everywhere and it just didn't align with my schedule and I just ran out of time and it eventually left the cinemas. Now, I could go on and do the old cheeky Gary torrent to try and check it out, but I definitely had to be in the right mindset. And I feel like the time was right when I was on the plane heading here to Tokyo. I'd watched Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and I thought, okay, let's do this. Let's do a light movie, a heavy movie, Sound of Freedom, and then finish off with a light movie, just to cleanse my palate. And I'm glad I watched it. It was heavy, it was grim, it was dark, it was some damn good filmmaking. But firstly, let me get all this housekeeping out of the way. I know full well that this film is stirring up a lot of controversy. And a lot of people deny the subject matter that the film revolves around, but let's face it. When the film starts off with based on a true story, and it's actually based on a real life person, these things really do indeed happen. And a lot of us try not to think about it, but unfortunately it does happen. And this film does touch on it. I say touch on it, but it delves into the nitty gritty and it gets quite uncomfortable and confronting at times. Sound of Freedom revolves around child trafficking and our lead protagonist, Tim, played by Jim Caviezel from Passion of the Christ fame. The character is actually based off Tim Ballard, who works for Homeland Security and is tasked with bringing down sex offenders and wanted pedophiles when, after rescuing one particular child, his sister is still out there and they make it their mission to try and track her down and reunite her with her family. Tim essentially embarks on a plan overseas with the help of some friends to set up a mock club filled with young prey where all the scum of the earth can frolic to, and amongst all this not only catch people in the act but also find the little boy's sister and bring the perpetrators to justice and reunite as many children as they can with their families who have been lost for months if not years. This film was actually shot and completed back in 2018 and the distribution deal was made with the Latin American subsidiary of 20th Century Fox. Now, when the studio was purchased by the Walt Disney Company, they shelved the film. Subsequently, the filmmakers bought the distribution rights back from the studio so they can distribute it on their own terms. Cut to 2023 and the film finally got released. In our case in Australia, a very limited screening, and it took a very long time for us to finally get it in cinemas. Now, the budget for this film was actually $14.5 million. It was produced by Faith Films. Its box office takings at this point come close to $250 million, which is just saying something. Now, let's not beat around the bush. Jim Caviezel isn't really mainstream these days and has chosen the path of performing in faith-based films, and each to their own, man. Go for it. More power to you. But this film hit a nerve. It was something that I had avoided for so long, but I'm so glad I watched it at the same time. Coming from a filmmaking perspective, it kept me glued to my seat. I could not look away. It was like car crash TV. And there were times when I was watching this film on the plane where I'd pause just to have a breather and I'd go, write a script for a video I'm working on. I'm like, nah, get back to it. And it's all I could think about when I'm trying to write this script. It leaves this profound effect on you because it's something we don't often think about or we try not to think about. It's that ignorance is bliss approach, but if you face it head on, it is such a damn good movie. But it's also a bit of a conundrum. At the same time, you have some incredible acting from not only Jim Caviezel, but the child actors as well. They go through some heavy shit in this film. I don't know how well they bounce back after filming with some of the heavy things that go on in this film. And it is very confronting at times with what we see happen in the film. But my God, those child actors were incredible. Like I said, Jim Caviezel, the supporting actors were great. We have some recurring character actors that we know from many films that are in this film. And some wonderful cinematography, a great score. But amongst that, it has elements of a Hallmark movie, if you know what I mean, in terms of the cheese factor. And that kind of takes you out of it a bit. But for the most part, it's such an enthralling and captivating film. But it leaves you with this sense of dread once the film is finished. Let's not beat around the bush. It is a very heavy subject that we are dealing with here. And the film has elements of Argo at times in terms of the tension and especially the third act, but it's nowhere near as intense and very clearly very different subject matter. very different. Now, in terms of how true things are to the real life Tim Ballard, things have been dramatized a little bit, and that's how things translate to film sometimes. You have to kind of blow things out of proportion a bit, especially when it comes to the climax of the film, which I think was so damn cool, but at the same time, Tim Ballard has gone on the record as saying, look, that never happened. They had to dramatize it. Most of the things that were scattered throughout the film are pretty accurate in terms of what he did, what he accomplished. So at the end of the day, Sound of Freedom, I'm glad I definitely checked it out. It's not for everyone. The subject matter is very heavy. It's one of those things, it's a very sensitive subject, but at the same time, if you can just remove yourself from all the hoo-ha that it has created in terms of the controversy and just look at it from a purely filmmaking perspective and enjoying a film, it is amazing. It's one of those things where I feel like it's just a one and done. I don't feel the need to watch it ever again, but I'm obviously happy to tell people you should check it out. But it's just definitely a one and done for me. But at the same time, I'm glad I definitely got around to watching it. And I was very on the fence about making this review. I'm not going to lie. But I'm glad I did, and I'm glad I checked it out. Jim Caviezel is wonderful in it. The child actors are absolutely incredible and go through the absolute ringer. The supporting cast is great. The story is great. The pacing is pretty damn good. It does dip a little bit towards the third act in terms of trying to set everything up for the climax, but at the same time, once the climax starts, it does not stop in terms of the momentum. Again, if you watch this film once and never watch it ever again, it's totally fine. With that being said, I'm going to be giving Sound of Freedom 4 geeks out of 5. Usually I do a joke when it comes to the rating system, but yeah, this is definitely a film you can't exactly joke about. My only advice to you, have a very happy, uplifting movie ready to watch once you have finished this film. I watched Dirty Rotten Scoundrels with Michael Caine and Steve Martin, which is just a delightful film, straight after I watched Sound of Freedom, and yeah, I'm glad I did. But again, at the same time, I'm glad I finally checked this film out, guys. Love you guts. And I'll catch you in the next one.